Okay. I'm Stacy Holmes. Sorry, so I've been the one yelling at the projector and screaming into my computer. I am, welcome. It's a full house. There's construction, the parking is bad, we're having technical difficulties, and yet this gracious community has allowed us to come into their community room and host it here. It's very hard to find space all over the city for groups this big for trainings, and we try to host it in a variety of places around the county to give a variety of agencies different access points. So it's a learning process. We've never used this space before, and we're very grateful. And it's obviously we're filling it up. So we have, I'm going to do some introductions, sort of do the lay of the land, and then we'll get started into the content. Like I said, I'm Cece Holmes. I'm on the King County System Administration team. I work with PitFocus, the vendor of the HMIS system. So we work very closely. We're here in Seattle. We have colleagues all over the country, and we work very closely with King County as the King County System Administrator. This is my colleague, Sarah. Sarah?
I'm Sarah Doherty. I lead the system administration team for King County, also work for PitFocus.
We have two other folks who are going to be speaking on the agenda today. Kate, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Kate Speltz with King County Homeless Housing Programs. Help to coordinate our contracting team for King County. I'm also the lead liaison on the HMIS for the county.
Randall?
And I'm Randall Gordon, and I work for Compass Housing Alliance as their data analyst.
In the interest of time, although we would love to have everybody introduce themselves, we're going to skip that part. We have about 50 agencies represented across the two audiences. So for those of you who have been through this before, you've heard me say this before, but some of you have not been to one of the HMIS trainings. So we are managing two audiences, an in-person audience and an online audience. The online audience, I'll be doing my best to manage questions, technical difficulties. Hopefully they can hear us, but we will be repeating your questions as much as possible so that they can hear us. We're also recording so that it can become a resource for everyone afterwards. How many folks in the room have never used HMIS before? Like their role in the agency, they just have had to rely on other people and they haven't used it. Anybody willing to be brave and raise their hand? How many people only just run reports? If you want to raise your hand. So not necessarily entering data, but just looking at the data, running reports. Okay. And then how many of you are in there every day? Okay, oh, great. Okay,
Right.
I think that our online audience is probably a similar mix. We know that when we do these trainings, we have a variety of different levels of users. We have people who know this stuff backwards and forwards, and we have people who only get once a week to run a report. They know how to do that one thing. And so we're always trying to speak to all those audiences. We'll do our best to answer questions. And appreciate you guys helping each other out when questions come up that those of you who are super users might be able to answer. One of the things we wanted to do with focusing on using the data for program management is that some folks who are entering the data and reporting to HUD and sort of are steeped in HMIS use it in a particular way, but there's a lot of data in there as a database management system that can be used for managing programs, for reporting to funders, for telling the story of your outcomes. And we want to make sure to focus on that. So we tried to frame this training sort of thinking about all the questions that we've all had as program managers, as people who have to report back to funders, who want to motivate our staff to look at outcomes. So we tried to frame this training in those terms. Kate, I know I want to sort of hand it off to you to speak to sort of why the focus on program management for this particular one.
So we just thought it was important because so many times when we have trainings, it is for the data entry people or for the HMIS leads. And we know that in a lot of agencies, the people who really know the programs are not necessarily the HMIS leads who are putting in data. So we felt this would be helpful both because in case you didn't know, HMIS data is being used quite a bit these days. And so for you to know what reports there are where you can do a quick check, maybe midway in the year. I know I submit some APRs to HUD, and I have found recently there are certain things when we get to time to submit, and when I look at it, I'm like, oh, I should have looked at that earlier in the year. Do all sorts of cleanup. So just sort of to have that opportunity to know for that outward, and then as Stacy said, hopefully it can be a useful tool for you within your program management, within your staffing. Since we're all putting a lot of time and energy into this, let's leverage it as much as we can. So we just wanted to make this opportunity to really focus on the reporting functionality, because I think that's one of the things that sometimes we don't take full advantage of.
Right. So before I hand it over to Sarah to start going through the content, housekeeping, bathrooms are out this hallway?
Straight down the hallway, the turn right.
There's the second right turn.
Okay, and thank you. I hadn't explored that far yet. And also, this training is scheduled to go until 10:30. We'll have a break time for folks to leave, other folks to come, and then we'll be having the quarterly meeting for the HMIS agency leads. And that will be only in person here in this same room. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your patience and good attitudes. Okay.
All right. So this is a little bit different from the kinds of trainings that we've done before. We haven't really focused on. We talk a lot about HMIS and what you can use HMIS for, but we haven't really framed it from a program management perspective. So hopefully, we tried to think about what would be most useful for program managers, and hopefully we came up with some things that are correct. Oh, okay. So the two main areas that we feel that HMIS can help support program managers is by telling your program story via HMIS, and then also supporting staff success. So we're going to start by talking about telling your program story using HMIS. So there are lots of things that make up a program story, of course, but the first thing is, what did we do? As your program probably does a variety of things, and some of those things are tracked in HMIS, and so we want to show you how to pull them back out. This is a really report-heavy training. I'm going to be just going through lots and lots of reports. I'm just going to talk about them briefly. I'm going to show you a screenshot, but I expect that it's going to be fairly overwhelming, which is why we created a handout that also covers all of the reports that we're going over here. So when you forget, after you leave this training and the memories fall from your brain, you'll have this handout to refer back to look at as a resource that can at least hopefully remind you of some options when you're wanting to run reports in HMIS, how to pull out the data that you need. Of course, we always welcome your questions directly to myself or to Stacy, and our help desk is happy to help as well. If you find that some of the reports we recommend don't quite get you what you need, feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about other options that might be there. This is mostly meant to give you some idea of where to start, and then also to hopefully whet your appetite for more. So first we're going to talk about what did we do? What did your program do? So the first thing that you did, the most basic thing, is that you probably enroll and exit clients into your program. So if you want to look at enrollments and exited clients, there are a couple of reports we recommend in HMIS. The first one is the program roster report. I'm going to show you a screenshot of. These are all, when you see actual data, it's all fake data. If you see, if there is real data, it'll all be blanked out. Any identifying data will be blanked out. So this is just a fake program with fake data in it. This is the program roster report. So this is just going to give you a basic look at essentially who's enrolled in your program. You can run it for all active clients in your program, or you can run it for folks who've exited within a certain amount of time. So it can be a helpful way to get just a quick picture of everybody who enrolled in your program, and then some basic information about them as well, including the length of their stay in your program. And if you're a program that's required to provide services, if you're a night-by-night emergency shelter, for example, you can see whether services are being documented for the folks who are enrolled as well. The next report that's useful for looking at enrolled and exited clients is the program details report. I should also mention that I'm not going to read off the slides. Well, sometimes I may read off the slides, but mostly I won't. But we will send out these slides afterward to everyone who attended, so you'll have this as a reference as well. So the program details report is probably the report that we recommend the most as a summary of information. I know you can't read this. It's actually a spreadsheet that's much wider than this, and I just took a couple of screenshots to give you an example of all the data that's there. And it's essentially all of the data on your clients. You can run this report at enrollment, at you can capture all of the data that you collected on your clients at enrollment, at status updates, annual updates, if your clients are enrolled for more than a year and you're entering annual updates into the system, and at exit, or all of the above. When you run this report, it gives you a tab for each program, and then it also gives you a tab for each entry, assessment, exit data as well. So it's a great, if you're wanting the full picture of everyone in your program, this is a great report to run to get that picture all at once. And again, it has a huge amount of information, essentially all the information that you're putting into HMIS about your clients, you'll be able to pull together on this report. It's particularly useful if you are scanning data for outlying values, or for people who are maybe missing data, or if you want to just work in a spreadsheet, it only generates as a spreadsheet, and so you can also manipulate the data as you want to in that format. So the next thing that you did, that you may do in your program, is provide services. Services can look like a lot of different things. They can be services that you're required to provide if you are an outreach program, or if you are a night-by-night emergency shelter, or if you are, for example, a Streets to Home recipient, if you have a Streets to Home program and you need to document financial services in HMIS. You can, in some cases, you're required to track services. In many cases, you're not, but your program may want to track services anyway, so that you have that information in HMIS and can then pull it back out and make use of it in the context of your program enrollments and the other information that's in HMIS. So the first report that I want, did you have a question?
So you just mentioned Streets to Home specifically for service financial data. So that doesn't go in a separate, like you can enter it in here, or
In HMIS?
Well, I'm just wondering, it'll show up here as well as in the
Not on
financial
this
report later.
Not on this report, but yes, there's another report that I'll be talking
Okay,
about.
I thought you said financials. So
Yes, it's one of it'll be the next thing that I talk about besides
I just got a little.
Sure. You can pull, the reports that I'm showing you will pull services, which include financial services, if you choose to include those services. But when you're looking at financial services, you're probably wanting to look at the money as well. And so there's a special report for that piece. So the service summary report is a super simple report that is just going to give you counts of the services that you provided to clients, and then the unique number of clients. This is a report, obviously, super basic information here, but if you're just wanting a quick count of clients, this is a great way to get it, a count of clients who you served. One thing I want to mention about all BitFocus reports is that when you run a report with aggregate numbers like this and you display it to the screen rather than downloading it as a PDF or as a spreadsheet, you can click on these numbers and it will generate a list of all the clients who make up those numbers. So if you're confused about, your total is 7, but you're pretty sure you didn't provide laundry services to anyone, you can click on that number to see who is showing up with laundry services and then look into why they have that information. Yeah.
My question is actually about that. Is there any intention in making the drill down off of what exactly the lists are available in Excel? Because when you do it in Excel, it only shows that.
I know.
So that
Wouldn't that be,
leaves us
can
with
you repeat
doing
the
that
question?
and then copying and pasting it over and then the format.
Right. The question was whether we can make the, when you click on the aggregate number to get the drill down list, whether that can be available to be downloaded into a spreadsheet format. That would be a lovely dream come true for us as well. We yearn for that every day. It is not currently available, but it's certainly a popular feature that we would like to see added to the software. So I think that it's likely that will be available at some point in the future. We just don't know when. But yes, we agree that would be super helpful for us as well.
Is this always unique clients, or in cases where the services are tied to households, is that going to give you a household count?
It should give you a unique client count. So because you may not necessarily provide the services to every member of the household. So in most cases you probably are, but in case you're not, this will just give you the specific count of clients. So the next report I want to mention is the service census report. This provides similar information to the service summary report, but a lot more. This is really helpful. The second table is essentially the content of the service summary report. The top table, what it's showing you is, I ran this report for May and for June, and so it's showing you every day of May and June in the report period, and how many times those services were provided. So this is a really useful way to make sure that, for example, if you're providing meals and you know that you have 30 people who come to every meal, you can quickly see that, oh, on the 21st, we had 0 people, somebody forgot to do the data entry. So it's a really helpful way to see the services that you're providing every day, in addition to those complete counts of the services that you provided during the time period. You select the services that you want to show up on this report. So if there are services that have 0 that haven't been provided, you'll see that they show up at the bottom, services without any household served. And so that's also a great way to see that, you know, the service that you're expecting people to provide isn't actually being provided. Yeah.
This is a service census report.
Yes.
When I generate it, it looks way different. So it's just a series, instead of having a grid like that, it's a vertical.
Dates.
Is that the
Yeah.
program census?
So there's housing census reports as well that are under the housing area of the report library.
No, this is under the services.
Interesting, because
Yeah.
the housing census ones, the ones that serve, that we have a program-based and a non-program-based service census that is based on the attendance services that are that line of dates that just show an aggregate number for each date.
I'm pretty sure it's under the services menu.
Okay,
I'll look at
well,
it
let's
again, but
find out which one you're talking about, because we can answer questions about that. Sarah's definitely, there's more reports that you'll see in the library than what
Yes.
we're going over here, for sure, because
And
there's a million reports.
I want to remind both the presenters and the people of the question that the focus of this is not some of the technical details. So you might want to make note of those for the HMIS leads portion.
Sure.
Right.
Not to not ask the question, but let's not belabor this as part of this training.
Sure. Yes? Oh. Can we turn off the lights?
Is that a little better?
Oh.
Oh.
Not that. I don't know how to turn off the.
Oh, the one over the,
John, can you hit the other light switch? There we go.
there.
Yay.
Yay, thank you, teamwork. And we are recording this as well, so you'll be able to look back through and see the slides and hear the content at the same time.
Yeah. All right, so the other kind of service that you may be tracking are financial services. Again, if, for example, I know that there are lots of streets to home agencies receiving streets to home funds here, and that you'll be tracking that money in services in HMIS. The report that we recommend for that is the Program Funding Source Financial Detail Report. This is what it looks like. It will show you totals by client, and as well as program totals and totals by service. And if you go back and edit your services, you can enter in check information, and so that will also show up here if you're tracking that in HMIS. So this is a handy way to look at if you have to track money in HMIS, the distribution of funds. This is a great report to use to get at that information.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I would add that not everybody understands that your projects are probably not set up with these kinds of services unless we are asked to set those up by your agency or a funder in order for you to track it. So if you're not seeing it there, it's probably because it was not set up that way, because services are only set up under very narrow circumstances automatically, and then otherwise it's essentially by request.
And so if you have services that your agency is providing that you would like to track in HMIS, talk to us about that, and we can work with you to see about setting them up so that you can pull this information back out into the reports that are available in HMIS. All right, next question. Who did we serve? That's, of course, an important question in telling the story of your program. So in HMIS, we collect, at a minimum, what are called the universal data elements. You guys, many of you are so familiar with HMIS. I was expecting a crowd that was less familiar, so I thought this might be, exciting news, but for most of you guys, it's not as exciting as I hope. So these are the universal data elements that we collect for all programs. These are all required by HUD for participation in HMIS. Name, date of birth, social security number. Those are the only pieces that may vary because we don't collect those for de-identified clients. We collect anonymized versions of those. But the other information is information that we should have for everybody, hopefully, ideally, if your clients will share it. And so this is the information that can be pulled back out for any program. So that was the idea. I just wanted to show you what's being put in so you can think about how you might want to pull it back out. The next piece are program-specific data elements. These are ones that that many communities require. These are the, including ours. And these are the most basic ones. There are many other program-specific data elements that we do not use in King County, so be glad we have such a short list. What you'll see is, what you might notice is, as the difference is that if you've ever looked on our website, our King County HMIS website, on the forms page, you can download a minimum intake form and a standard intake form. The minimum intake form contains only those universal data elements, and then the standard form, which is the standard in our community, include additionally these program-specific data elements. So for pretty much every program, we're going to have both the universal data elements and the program-specific data elements. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, with the exception of contact, which only applies to outreach programs, and then bed night date, which, and date of engagement, which also only applies to outreach programs, and then bed night date, which only applies to night-by-night emergency shelters. So those two sets of data together are the pieces that we're collecting for all enrollments and exits and annual updates in HMIS. And so these are the pieces of information that we can pull back out into reports. So when we want to look at our clients, where can we find that information? One report that we recommend is the Client Demographics Report. This is a handy report. It's very long. I just took a few screenshots of it here. It covers lots of different demographic information with lovely charts if you wanted to take screenshots and use them for your own purposes. This one thing I want to mention about this report is that in addition to demographics, it also breaks down your client's chronic homeless status. So this is a great way to look at whether your program is serving the number of chronically homeless clients that you think you're serving, and can help you look into why those clients are not showing up as chronically homeless if you think they should be. The next report I want to show you is kind of a random report. I was just trying to think about showing you some stuff that you might not otherwise come across in HMIS, you might not have looked at yourself. And to just give you an example of the kinds of things that can be pulled back out. So this next one is called the zip code jurisdiction breakdown. Last permanent zip code is one thing that we collect in King County. It's not a universal data element, but it is something we collect here. And you can use this report to see where your clients are coming from. This will give you a breakdown by state and city, and then zip code for each of your clients or households, which can be a useful thing to know, if you're serving folks locally, or if you're serving folks more broadly, and where your folks are coming from. And then, of course, the most important piece of telling your story is, what were the results? How did it all work out? Was there a question? Oh, sorry, yeah.
Do you have a report that can show specifically for rapid rehousing programs clients that have a move-in date or a permanent housing date?
Do we have a report that does that? Shows that?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. The question was, is there a specific report that shows for rapid rehousing clients their move-in date?
Have you looked at the details report? That program details report? Because
Not at that one specific, I was trying to look and see if I can pick it out.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
it might be on there.
Yeah.
And that move-in date, it is on the program details report. So that would be the way to see, because that's one that has been missed before.
Yeah.
So that would be a good one to see. So that was that big spreadsheet of all the enrollments.
Yeah.
And I know that we might be seeing it in other ways in the future, because that is one of the big data standard changes that's coming in the fall.
You mentioned for that program details report that it took an annual assessment, and we do just sporadic status assessments not the 90-day or the annual, but just do whatever they move in?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I will repeat the question really quick and just say that, just because I know our online audience is having a hard time hearing questions from the back of the room. So the question is how the program details report captures the data, because you do status updates versus just annual updates. And you can choose, if you try to run that program details report, it'll give you the option for all, and you'll have a tab for your enrollment screen and a tab for status updates and a tab for annual updates, or sorry, assessments, yeah. And then exits. So it should, every screen that you enter data into, you should be able to see that on that report.
All right. What were the results? You probably are all familiar with the Seattle-King County Program Outcomes Report. It is the most popular report in our report library at present because it is such a focus and it's made up of all the outcomes that the community has agreed to work towards. We have a guide available for that report. If you've never used the guide, it's available on our King County HMIS website, kingcounty.hmis.cc, under client forms. It's a very helpful guide towards understanding what is making up all of those measures. And then recently there have been changes to that report. So actually I can show it to you here. So a couple of different changes that I'll mention, which if you subscribe to our mailing list, you got an announcement about the changes, but I'll still go over them for folks who aren't subscribed to our mailing list. We changed the definition of folks coming in from homelessness. Before, it did not exactly align with the HUD definition that says that that if folks were in an institution before becoming housed, but then prior to that they were homeless, they should still be counted as homeless. So we changed the report to reflect that. So now folks who are coming from institutions will still be reflected as homeless so long as they were homeless before that institutional stay and it was less than 90 days. We also broke down equity outcomes by race rather than just breaking them down by white households and households of color. And then there's a new program specific outcome section that, which you can kind of see there near the bottom, that looks at a couple of outcomes for permanent housing programs and rapid rehousing programs. So this is kind of a report that's going to be continuing to change and evolve as the community has different needs, and we figure out what those are. And we'll work with the city to continue to change it. But these are the recent changes, and this is a great report to look at. Hopefully you're all looking at this report. If not, I strongly recommend that you go and run it first thing immediately when you get back to your office, just to see how your programs are doing. You can see utilization, program utilization, which is the most popular thing that folks are looking at and talking to us about, as well as a variety of other outcomes that our community is looking at. So,
has everybody run this report? Raise your hand if you've run the outcomes report.
Yay!
Woo! Okay. Because when people ask us about utilization, that's what we'll run for your program. That'll be the first thing we check.
Yeah, and it's a great report for identifying other issues. It is probably not going to be the be all and end all of figuring out those issues, but it's a great start so that you can say, oh, wow, we only have 76% utilization. I'm certain that it's higher than that. And so then we can work with you to dig into those numbers to figure out where to go from there. What are the next steps?
What program types does the program outcomes report really work with the best?
Well,
The question.
Oh, sorry. I'm usually so much better at remembering to repeat the question. The question was, what program types does the outcomes report work best for? It looks at a lot of exit information. So in theory, it works for any program, but not everything on not every part of every outcome is going to work for every program. If you're not a housing program, for example, a shelter or a housing program, you're not going to have utilization because you're not having, utilization looks at beds. So you're not, that's going to show as NA for programs that don't have beds. Obviously with the new program specific outcomes, if you're not a rapid rehousing program or a permanent housing program, you're not going to see information there. But you can still see, your households exited to a permanent destination and a temporary destination, returns to homelessness, average length of stay. You can still see a lot of information there. This information should also align with the All Home System Performance Dashboard. And so this is a great way to dig into those numbers. And I think that's one thing that the city is constantly looking at changing is kind of how do we add additional outcomes to make sure that it is the most useful report for programs that have different kinds of outcome requirements. So for now, any program, but increasingly even more so any program. Yeah.
Are there any plans to make this report available on local instances of HMIS?
I don't believe so. Since it's meant to reflect HMIS data, we want it to make sure that folks are clear that this is only in the context of HMIS.
Of the King County?
Right.
Because we have our own instance, and it's just really difficult to ensure that that our data fidelity is the same across the two databases when we can't run identical reports.
Well, I mean, you have many other reports that do match up to what we have in HMIS. So, if you see discrepancies between, or if the outcomes report isn't reflecting the outcomes that you believe should be the case, then talk with us and we'll help you troubleshoot for that.
Is the return to homelessness rate still only looking at return entries into the HMIS parity system for determining that number?
Yes. Can you repeat it? Oh, sorry. The question was whether the returns to homelessness rate is only looking at re-entries into HMIS, and the answer is yes. Yes?
If we can track return to homelessness by them coming back into the HMIS system, then why can't we track them coming into housing to a different provider? So in other words, if it counts against us, that they're returning into entry-level homelessness services, why can't it count for us when they return to, say, transitional housing or permanent supported housing, but not with our agency?
That's a great question. I would bring that up with your contract monitor. They're the ones who give input into what this report will ultimately look like. So, if you think that would be a beneficial addition, then talk with your contract monitor. And
I don't know if you want to repeat what that was. I can just type it.
All right. So then I wanted to show a couple of other outcome-oriented reports, just because there may be other outcomes that you're interested in looking at. Every program is different, and there may be outcomes that your program has that that aren't reflected in, for example, the outcomes report. So we have a report called Employment and Education Report, which shows a demographic breakdown of your folks who are exiting and whether they exited and were employed or in school, which if you are a youth program, this may be something that would be useful for you to look at. It's just one example. Again, I was just trying to think of some things that you might not have looked at that may reflect outcomes that you're interested in looking at, or that can kind of spark your curiosity thinking about other things that you might be interested in looking at in HMIS. And then the next report I wanted to talk about is the APR, the Annual Performance Report. Many of you are probably familiar with this report. It is a HUD required report. However, it includes a huge amount of outcomes data based on the HUD expectation of outcomes. And so it's a useful report that you can use to look at a variety of outcomes, even if you're not required to use the APR. It's still a report that can give you a lot of information about what your program is doing according to HMIS. And I just pulled a couple of tables from the report. It's a very long report that show changes to income for clients, income source and income amount. And so, income is one that is of interest to folks, having your clients increase income when they exit your program. And so using the APR, that's a way that you can look at whether your clients are increasing their income when they're exiting your program, as well as many other things. If you haven't looked at the APR, it's a very useful report. Yeah.
And you are able to run this APR for any program,
yes,
regardless of whether they need to file?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
And for those who aren't familiar with it, another thing that could be helpful is that it runs a lot of the things by those who have left and those who are still staying. So you can also use that as an opportunity to see if there's any difference between the two groups over a given time period.
That's great. That's true. Yes. Kate just mentioned that it's a great report for running to compare your leavers and your stayers to get that picture as well. All right, supporting staff success. So that's the next piece of program management that we're going to talk about in HMIS. So when you're talking about supporting staff success, one thing that you may be interested in looking at is who needs support around data entry. You may be doing data entry, you may need the support around data entry, or you may be supervising staff who need support around data entry, and it's helpful to make that determination, to figure that out. So first I wanted to talk a little bit about where you can find out about the data quality expectations. Excuse me, we do have some set data quality expectations in our community. Our continuous data quality improvement plan, which is available again, on our King County HMIS website under that client form section. Everything is under client forms. It's the only page that we have access to edit, but we're changing that. We're going to be having an all new HMIS website soon that will have a lot more resources on it. We're very excited about it. But for now, client forms is where you go. And so that's where you can look at our continuous data quality improvement plan, which outlines requirements for completeness, which means the percentage of complete data that you should have in the system. And complete data means that the answers are not client doesn't know, data not collected, client refused, etc. And it also outlines the data timeliness, which means how quickly the data should be entered into the system after you have collected it from clients. Potentially less relevant, but maybe also of interest in the continuous data quality improvement plan is an outline of the reporting that we do in the community, the HUD reporting, as well as some local reporting, and what we do and what we focus through in terms of reaching out to the community around data quality issues. So it can be useful to see that we have a calendar in there and we break each requirement down. So it can be useful to see that, to know when we're going to be hassling you about data quality issues throughout the year. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is the data quality training that we did. Some of you may have attended that training. It's available online. The link is right there. Again, we'll be sending out these slides. But if you want a refresher on data quality, or if you have staff who would benefit from that refresher, they can watch the training on YouTube. All right, so staff reports. We have a lot of different staff reports. The monthly staff report is one that some of you may receive. It goes out on the 15th of every month to agency leads. And it looks like this. It will show you overall for your agency what your average timeliness is, how quickly you're getting data into the system, and how complete your data is. And then down below at the bottom of the first page, it'll break down all of your staff and look at their average timeliness and their average completeness. So that can be a useful way to look for any of your staff who may be, who could perhaps use some more support. And then the rest of the report breaks down for every field what your percentages are for data completeness. So that can be useful to see that, wow, we are really terrible at collecting veteran status, for example. What can we do to do a better job of boosting our collection of veteran status? The next report I want to talk about is the user active caseload. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the caseload functionality in HMIS because it can be a useful way to kind of collect clients together. But when you enroll a client in HMIS, the client is automatically added to your caseload, and they can be switched to other staff members' caseload. But the caseload functionality is a useful way to kind of look at all of those clients who are attached to one person in HMIS, one staff person, and to look at whether they have an annual assessment done, whether they're receiving services, et cetera. And this report just gives a summary of that, the user active caseload report. So here you can see all the clients are hidden and their birth dates are hidden, but you can see there that you run it for a particular staff. I think you can run it for multiple staff at once, and it will show you all the clients on that staff person's caseload. That's all the clients who they've registered in HMIS or who have been assigned to them, whether they've done annual assessments and whether services have been entered for those clients. How can we monitor for security and data quality? So we talked a little bit about data quality on the staff level. We're going to talk now about it on the program level. So data quality issues, the program data review. This is a small report that will help you identify clients who have missing data elements. You choose a program and it's going to show you all of your clients who are enrolled in that program during the report period that you select. and mention whether there are any who have missing data entry fields. So this can be a quick way to look down your clients to say, okay, you know, we obviously Autumn leads, we're missing some data, so we need to look into her record and see if we can add that data if it can be added. A much more robust data quality report that's available in HMIS is the HMIS Data Quality Report. This is a relatively new report that HUD asked all HMIS vendors to develop. It's part of HUD's data quality framework, which we will all be hearing more about over time. It's a pretty comprehensive data review. Many reports that we already have in HMIS cover some pieces of this, but HUD kind of pulled it all together and set a minimum standard that communities should be or can be looking at in terms of data quality. It is a very lengthy report, and we created a comprehensive guide, like 14 pages long, that goes over all the things that make up the different measures on that report. And so again, that's available on our King County HMIS website, and highly recommended if you're going to dig into that report. Here are just a couple of pages from the report that you can see, well, or not see, as the case may be. Essentially what it does is gives you summaries of information for your program, who you're serving. This first page is just information about who served, how many adults, how many leavers, how many stayers, etc. Basic information, and then it starts digging into, for all of those clients, what data has problems, what data is missing, and HUD, of course, considers missing anything that is client refused, client doesn't know, data not collected, etc. All of those missing values. And then it also, you can't really see it very well, but there's also this data issues column. And so for many of these items, HUD has identified what they would consider issues, and that is what the guide that we created is particularly useful for, because it's not really clear what a name issue might be, but HUD came up with a specific list of things that we should look for in HMIS records to identify clients who have issues with their records. So it's not that their data is missing, but it might be problematic in some way. So that can be a helpful place to look at. And again, all of these numbers are aggregate numbers. You can click on them and get the list of clients who make up any of these measures. So this report, again, identifies missing values, looks at universal data elements, looks at a few specific things, chronic homelessness, data timeliness for your agency. And it's just a really comprehensive report that includes a lot of good information about data quality, the status of data quality for your agency or for specific programs in your agency.
And I would add that this might be a good one that program managers and HMIS leads could consider together, because there may be some that as a program manager, are really important data elements, and it might not be the highest percent missing. So someone who's just scanning for large areas where there are issues might not catch one that's really important to you. So it might be one to work on together.
Good point. Yeah, Kate just mentioned that this may be, the data quality report may be one that's good for program managers and HMIS leads to work on together, since they both bring different sets of information about which data is particularly relevant to look into. All right, staff activity, looking at staff activity in HMIS. First, we have the staff client data activity report. This shows you everything that staff are doing in HMIS. So you run it for a staff person, and this shows for clients what records they're entering. So you can see program enrollments, that profiles were edited, profiles were created, etc. So this can be a really helpful way to make sure that your staff are doing the work that you're expecting them to do. And it also gives you the date and time that folks are doing work, so that you have that information in case there are issues you need to follow up on.
Excuse me,
Yes.
can you go back?
Yes.
Is profile edited, would that be an indication that a case note was entered, or?
I think that's just the actual profile. So like if you change their birth date or their veteran status or
So it
something like
doesn't
that.
show if there was a case note entered anywhere.
It should, yes. This is
It
kind of
should.
limited just because I don't generally enter
That's
case
my
notes when I'm doing test data, but yes,
Okay.
it should include all of that.
That's
Anything
it.
that you do on that client, at that client level should show here.
Is there a plans to add services to this when staff also enter services to that report?
That is interesting. I feel like we talked about that. So the question was whether there's a plan to add services to this report, and I feel feel like we had a conversation about this and it was supposed to be added, so it may be in the works. I think it's in the works. I'm recalling that.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah, okay. I'll make a note of that actually, just to make sure. Because we have noticed that some things were missing from this report and asked for them to be added, so it's no problem if that isn't a plan. Yes, I agree. Services would be very useful. All right, and then the next staff report is the user activity report. This is much more basic. It just shows when your staff have logged on and for how long they were logged on. So it just can give you that information to make sure, especially this is useful if you have any sort of security concerns about staff accessing the system when they shouldn't be or at times they shouldn't be. This is a useful report to see that information. Okay, so those are all the reports that I'm going to talk about. The handout that you have includes all of those reports with a breakdown of kind of what section they fell into. So hopefully that is a useful resource going forward when you're trying to remember all of the reports that I just talked about here.
And the online audience received that. If you had registered ahead of time, you received that attachment in an email yesterday evening, and we will resend the attachment when we resend this recording, so you'll have an electronic version of this if it would be helpful for you to share with your staff.
Yeah. So what features can better support our workflow? So what I wanted to do was just pretty briefly, actually, how are we doing on time here?
According to.
Okay. Oh, we have
Sorry.
a good amount of time.
Yeah,
We're
okay.
ahead of schedule.
Yep.
Okay, great. Oh, good, perfect. Okay. So I just wanted to demonstrate a few things in HMIS that you may or may not be aware of that may actually be useful for your programs, features in HMIS that you may not be using. So actually, I'm just gonna pull up my list here so that I can just walk through them really quickly. And then I'm gonna switch to our training website. So this is just our training site. It's a little bit different from live HMIS, but mostly it's the same, but it's what we use so that we're, of course, not showing client data during trainings. So the first thing I want to talk about is the caseload functionality. I mentioned that caseload report that is a good way to look at all the folks who are assigned to your caseload. As a user, you also can look at who's assigned to your caseload by using this caseload tab that you can access from pretty much any screen. And it's just going to show you for each of your programs who's assigned to you as their case manager and just basic information about the clients, length of stay, household members. If there are more than one household member, you'll see a little plus here that you can expand, and then you can see who else is in that family. So if you're not using this, if you're not aware of it, this can be a useful way to just kind of look at all of the clients assigned to you. You can also see there's a status due tab that will show you who is due for an annual assessment. That means who's been enrolled in the program for more than a year. And then the case manager tab, I actually have no idea what that does. You don't know, do you, Stacey?
It's fairly recent that we've had some changes to that tab, so I'd be hesitant to speak because we
Okay.
have not been using it. But we do have some new case manager functionality connected to coordinated entry as well.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
and not everybody in the room here might see that tab. So
Okay.
I don't know if you need to delve into
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
because you as an admin
Yeah.
might be seeing it.
Right. The most important thing is the active caseload and then this status due tab that can be helpful for seeing who's due for an annual assessment, an annual update. The next thing I want to talk about is secure messaging. This is very helpful, especially if your agency does not yet have secure email. You can send secure messages to anyone else in HMIS using the Clarity inbox, which you access here via your this little envelope icon. It shows you how many messages you have. I don't check my messages super often on this system, but this is where you get system notifications as well, but it's also a place that you can email anyone else and you can do it securely from within the system. So you can use client identifying information if it's in the system, you can use client names, and the recipient will receive the notification in their Clarity inbox as well. So it's a useful way to communicate if you don't have a secure email at your work. you can use this to circumvent that and still be able to communicate with other providers in the community about clients. The next thing I want to talk about is our client forms. I'm just going back to the home screen here. I'm just going to pick a client. So there are lots of tabs up here that you may be familiar with when working with a client. These are all client level tabs. And I want to talk about client, what do I have next? Client forms, which are actually under files. So it's client files, not forms. This is where you can upload files for your clients. If your clients, for example, you need to, they just got their ID and you want to save a copy of it because you're worried that they'll lose it and it was hard to get. And so you want to keep a copy and make sure that it's centrally available. You can upload documentation like that. You can scan it and upload it as an attachment so that it's here, it's available. It's available to you, it's available to other agencies working with this client. And so it can be a helpful central place to store documentation. If you don't want it to be available to the entire community, you just want folks at your agency to be able to access it. When you're in a program enrollment, you'll see that there's also a forms tab here. If you upload forms here, only people at your agency will be able to see them. If you upload them here, then the whole community will be able to potentially see them. So just a good thing to know that there's a place where you can store client information, client documentation, if that's helpful.
Where was that again? How did you get there?
So the client level one is under files, just on any client page, and that's the one that everybody can see. And then the program specific one you access under the programs tab, and this is only if you have a program enrollment for the client. So when you go to this tab, you'll see your enrollments for your agency, and then you can edit them to go into that enrollment. And then there's the forms tab, which is where you'll be able to upload it. And if that's not clear, feel free to talk to us after or to contact the help desk about anything that I've covered that is just very brief and didn't go into enough detail. I didn't want to get too much into the technical details. I just wanted to show you this stuff exists. So, yeah.
Would client contact information go under the location tab?
Yes, it is best to put client contact information under the location tab. That may be changing soon. You'll be hearing more about us from that soon. Client contact information has been kind of an ongoing challenge, and we're working with coming up with solutions to better track that information, especially around coordinated entry.
I'm just going to remind us to keep our questions and our discussion as much as possible to reports and report functionality.
Sure.
So anything in this client level one tab is visible to anyone in the community?
Everything except client notes. Client notes are not shared with anyone else in the community, and that was the next thing I was going to talk about. Client notes are only visible to your agency, whether tracked here, or there's usually a notes tab under here as well. They're only available to within your agency. That is the one thing that is not shared across the community. Yeah.
So moving forward, if our program uses a specific set of information routinely, and we'd like to try and generate a specific report that maybe includes movement date, family size, things along those lines, what would be the process of requesting something like that? Is that a plan functionality?
Well, oh yes. So the question was, if you collect a certain set of information and want to have a report that you can use to get at that information, what's the process to go about getting that? I think the easiest way to go about that is we're going to be rolling out ad hoc reporting within the next several months. Agencies will have access to the ability to do ad hoc reporting, and that's going to be the first best way to see if you can meet your own needs by pulling together data that you're interested in looking at. If you can't, then we can talk about other options beyond that, but hopefully that'll be a useful first step for folks. Okay, so I talked about client notes as well. So again, client notes, useful for tracking client information, not shared with anybody else except your agency. And then the last thing I want to mention are public alerts, which, oh. Okay. Sorry, this is a little bit confusing because it's under the, public alerts are under the notes tab. Public alerts are publicly available, even though the notes are not publicly available. So it's a little bit confusing, but you can add in a public alert that will show up as a little banner on the top of the screen for your clients. I think this one should have one. It does. Okay. When you go to their profile screen, you'll see a little banner that they have a public alert. And this is a great way to notify other folks in the community something important about this client. Maybe they need an interpreter, or maybe you really need to get in touch with them because you have a resource available for them, but are not able to reach them through the conventional contact means that you have for them. So you want to put out a public alert to let other agencies know that you're looking for this client and to please have them call you. So this can just be a useful tool to sort of say, hey, there's something about this client I really need everybody to know. Please, contact me about them, or whatever the next follow-up step is. So I just wanted to mention that. Also a piece of functionality that is in the system that you may or may not know about and that can potentially be useful to your programs.
Can you, before you leave Waltrain, do you want to go to the library and just show them?
Oh, sure. And just quickly, in case folks aren't running reports, I just want to mention that where you run reports is under this little waffle menu. There's a reports icon, and that will take you to the report library, which is broken down in sections. There's a ton of reports. Again, feel free to poke around and see if there are other reports that might meet your needs. Excuse me, if you're looking for specific data, don't hesitate to contact the help desk or Stacy or myself, and we can see what we can figure out. Yeah, Joy? Yeah.
Can you repeat that?
Yes. The question was whether if folks have questions about what goes into a specific report, where's the best place to get answers for that? First, I will show you. We have a help center, which is and this is also, there's a tab that, or a slide that has this on it as well. Get clarity get.clarity.hs.help. And this is our HMIS help center. So you can ask any kind of questions. How do I enroll a client? How do I do whatever it is that you need to do? And there is a whole section on the reports library that will break down a lot of those reports. Not every report is represented there. So it's a good first start for where to look for more information about reports. If you don't find your reports, then yes, contact the help desk. They're a good next step. And if they don't know the answer, they'll find out. All right, so let me go back to the slides here. All right. So that concludes my portion here, and now Randall is going to talk with us.
One of the things that we found with all this data that we have access to, what do we do with it? How do we make it useful, and how do we make it so that we can actually make change to a program? So let's go. So how do we locate the opportunities to make change? Well, one of the ways that'll happen is your contract monitor may come to you and say, hey, I noticed that your utilization is really low for this period. Can you help us figure out what's going on? Or by internal monitoring. So we have set up our own dashboard system where we take reports and compile them so that we maintain a running record month to month so that we can look at it and trend it on our own. So the contract monitors come to you and said, hey, utilization is low. How are we going to fix that? Well, it's allowed us to make a plan to say, hey, we looked at the data for that period. We see that it's low. One of the reasons behind it being low for that period is we just moved our location, or we haven't been utilizing our referral sources to their fullest, and kind of making a plan on how to attack that. So what are the things that we're going to do to improve that particular outcome? So we're going to reach out to our resource providers. We're going to extend our network. We're going to accept more referrals, try and raise our utilization rate up so that we make full use of all the beds that we have available for that resource. And then you want to make sure that you have a way of monitoring that progress. And one of the way that we monitor it is by the monthly dashboard, and we communicate those out to all of our senior leadership, and it filters down to program management as necessary. The tools basically that we use to do this, like the outcomes report is by far my favorite #1 report. I run that thing at least once a day for every program. The program details report I run when the outcomes report has told me that there is something I should be looking for. So either utilization is low, or one of the other data points that comes up in the utilization report is funky, and I want to know why. So then I'll run program details, and I'll look at it on a much broader scale so that I can try and narrow it down to figure out exactly where our problem started, what the problem is. Was it a reoccurring client that someone deleted an exit date from instead of re-enrolling them in the program? And those are all things that will come out of the program details report. Like suddenly you'll get a length of stay that's 800 days. Well, it was 800 days ago that we first enrolled that client. So it's just triggers to let us know that there's something wrong. And the way that happens is we use the reports all the time. I try and encourage all the program managers at Compass to run the same set of reports all the time on at least monthly, so that they have a good kind of overview of what their program is expecting, what it's doing. It also it gives you the ability to kind of when you know that one of the data cleanup dates is coming, you're already prepared for it. And so like we try and keep our data clean at the get-go so that we don't suddenly end up in a 2-week rush to fix 1,000 records. That's rough. And when that happens, nobody wants that to happen. So one of the ways to do that is basically the continual monitoring. One of the things that you'll see on the next slide is kind of the dashboard that we've created that kind of helps us track all of that stuff, and is our lead indicator to when there's a problem or when there's something that we need to look at in more depth. The main reason to encourage program management to run the reports is consistency creates familiarity. Familiarity creates confidence, that you can know what your program is doing. You can know that all of the data that you're entering is correct and clean and valuable and useful. So what all of that work turns into is what this looks like. So we compile across all of I deleted the program names, but this is the actual data from Compass. We track how many new guests we get every month. We total up the year-to-date guests. We look at how many of them are active at the moment, which means the active enrollment in their program. Also, I think it correlates to active homeless, like category 1 homeless. We track length of stay, the average length of stay for all of the clients. It's color coded to the standards for the RFP to make it even at a glance more useful. So that yellow means we're close, but we're not there. Green means that we're either so close to it that it doesn't matter, or we're rapidly going to approach it. Red means that obviously that we're not, that we're nowhere close on that. We look at entries from homelessness, and it's really nice to be able to take all the outcomes data that we see and compile it into one resource. So just because it's the difference between handing someone 5 different sheets, one for each program, and then having to have them do the mental math. And it takes me, about an hour or so to compile all this. It takes longer to run all the reports than it does to actually compile them into something useful. And it's just a little Excel template, and we literally just copy it in and paste it in. So I do this every month. And we do combine like quarterly data and then cumulative quarterly data.
Can you make sure to speak up a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So what this has done is it's allowed us to discover issues in the programs. One of the programs had really low utilization. It allowed us to make a plan on that we could submit to contract monitoring and say, hey, we see this as a problem. We know it's a problem. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. So step one is to reach out, make sure that our referrals are actually the resources we have currently are working. And then we had the ability to monitor that progress. So we went and we started at 70%. And so just by reactivating the current referral resources, it started to decline, but it wasn't quite enough. So we broadened the referral network. It still wasn't enough because we noticed something the more we looked into it, we noticed that, hey, on the 1st to the 5th of every month, guess what happened? All these people that we signed up and that are supposed to be here are taking their nights out from the program. Well, it happens that the 1st and the 5th is usually when those clients get paid. They don't want to stay in the shelter. They have money. They got better things to be doing. But that was affecting our utilization rate. So how did we correct for that? Well, we started reaching out for single night only stayers and started filling those beds for single night only because we know that at the 1st of the month, that's going to be a problem. As a result of that, the utilization has kept climbing up, but it's allowed us to create a plan and have measurable increments where we can look at it and know if we're achieving success or not. It's become a very measurable and useful tool because the data is there. And now we're just presenting it in a visual format that makes it really easy to see month to month, quarter to quarter, if we're doing the right stuff, if we're trending in the right direction. You always want to be going up. And that's what has allowed us to do that. That dashboard is compiled probably 90% from the outcomes report, and then I take some demographic data and compile it into a piece of dashboard that's also not shown. But it's basically we track for data completeness. Mostly in the dashboard, it's mostly about data completeness. It's about making sure that we've captured all of the base elements that we need. So we monitor for the universal data elements to make sure that we're not missing any of those. Those get called out every month when it happens. I will send mail to the program manager to say, hey, I noticed the following clients are missing X. Can you correct their record? And that's all part of ongoing data maintenance because in 2 months, I don't want Sarah and Stacy to send me an email that says you have 1,000 clients that need to be fixed or that there's all this data missing. And this makes it an incremental process instead of a do it now process and things are going to it just kind of helps you keep everything in line for meeting your funded requirements. And so when we see red, sometimes for exits to permanent is a prime example of that's a red field or yellow in a lot of our programs. So in the emergency shelters in particular that this is reflecting, that's not necessarily a bad thing for us because it just tells us that the program wasn't designed around our current goals. And so how do we align how do we change the program to align to current goals so that we can monitor that, or to make a conscious decision that that's not what that program is for and make a different, make an alternate decision of that. But without having the data available and without being able to look at it and see it on a constant and kind of easy to digest basis, none of that would be possible. I guess any questions? I mean, I'm not like I don't need a whole lot more time. So if you have any questions specifically, like what generated that, or what the kind of the process behind, like what led us to basically to create that, it was all about making sure that we could take the huge amount of data that is available and compressing it into a format that let us look at it easily and quickly.
When you're looking at specifically at like client reviews that client doesn't know for the data quality, like what do you look for kind of an acceptable level, which is
3% or less is what we shoot for.
The community standard is 5%, just so you know, but great job, Compass.
There's a lot of places where we don't, where that is difficult to come to.
How much pushback did you receive from individual program managers? I mean, you're talking about redesigning programs that meet goals, but they designed the programs the way that they felt they should be designed.
So
Can you repeat the question and speak up? We're having some sound issues.
the question is how to combat program management pushback when you're trying to align the program to the goals. A lot of that is through demonstrating to them the value of the data and the goal that we're trying to reach. A lot of that is also directly related to funding, and the goals that we present to them are I try and keep a one-to-one relationship between this is something that the funders are requiring. It's not a choice, but I'm willing to help figure out how to there's always a way to come to the middle and figure out a way to make improvement with that. But aligning it with the funder needs kind of helps streamline a lot of that, because at a certain point we can't do our job without the dollars that they provide.
I would like to also say that hopefully we are all interested in serving more people, moving more people to permanent housing and using the resources that we have.
There was a question on the back.
Are there any questions in general? We're actually perfectly timed. Randall, thank you so much for sharing the story. Sarah and I thought that it would be, is this for him or just in general? Okay, so thank you. We thought that it was very important that we could find one of the many HMIS agency leads that we do send an email to that says, please clean up these thousands of records, because we know, just because we happen to hear about this example of how then what the next step is between running all these reports from HMIS and using it in a way that then affects your service intervention, affects your funder reports. And so that's sort of the next phase that, as somebody in an agency partnering with program managers, you could give us an example of.
And so that's when going back to the utilization example, that's literally what it's all about, is working with the program manager to have them know that their resources are available to them, that, hey, reach out to your referral sources. This is something and then we're going to measure it and come back and figure, if that's not working, what else can we do? Well, let's reach out to more hospitals, et cetera, until you bridge that gap and you can see the number going.
I just have a quick question. Do you use this at Compass in other capacities, like in research development? You give this report to...
I don't know the
Can you
output
repeat
of my, do the dashboards get used in other places in Compass aside from program management?
So I am one of the program managers that he works with on this stuff. We've been working on some grant proposals and pulling data out of HMIS and pulling reports. Not just this one. This one's really nice month to month to be able to just look at real quick. But a lot of the other stuff that you guys talked about and shared, we can pull data from and compile. Even on just stories to funders. We recently tried to boost a little bit on what we're doing on social media. So pull some data out for stories related to that. Was able to help out with the narrative stuff.
And I know, being just director and looking over all of our programs at the agency, I use these reports every month in order to look at trends across certain types of programming. So across our permanent housing, restorative services, to identify training opportunities and how to support staff through those trends that I'm observing.
Okay. Any more questions for Randall before we sort of open it up to general Q&A? Okay, thank you, Randall. And I'll stand here and we can do some questions. We don't have a lot of online questions right now, but online audience, please feel free to let us know. We are having some sound issues, so we may not be able, for the online audience, we may be able to capture all the crosstalk among your peers here in the room, but we'll do our best to repeat anything that's instructional. You had a question.
Yeah, so one of the questions has to do with the Seattle King County Outcomes Report, and last time I came to a training, I learned how to select all our different programs that people are enrolled in, but how do we know when we're doing an RFP or applying for funds that the folks that are looking at our data are also pulling all of those enrollments to capture the whole program? And I know that there's been some discussion about having one program, especially with rapid rehousing, that then has drop-down funding sources so that we don't have to de-enroll and re-enroll if we change funding sources for that client. We just want to be able to make sure that we're capturing the entire program and not just those little bits of funding. And I understand that funders also want to be able to pull out what they specifically funded, and that seems to be captured in the financial report that you have. So there's a way to do that just for that funder, but I'm just wondering where that conversation has gone, where we're at with that, and how do we ensure that potential funders are pulling the entire program and not just one of the 4 or 5 names for our rapid housing
Right,
program.
right.
Yeah.
So the question will be hard to repeat, but hopefully my answer will capture it. So one thing I will say is that about the pulling what funders in terms of the expenses, that Streets to Home example, I will just repeat, is specific to Streets to Home. So there's a lot of Streets to Home providers in the room, but not every funder, most funders don't require expenses being tracked in HMIS, nor would we recommend that, because most accounting systems would take care of most of expenses outside of the agency, and it would almost be double data entry. Diversion we also track though, and you are an agency that has both. At Solid Ground. So yes, we do track diversion monies as well, and we can. So that again, but I just want to clarify that. I also know about the way that the rapid rehousing programs are set up in Solid Ground, and most of the reports will show, when you run them, will show all of the which programs were included at the bottom of that report, and we have that on the outcomes report as well. So that will, if you're submitting the report as evidence of here's how we got our numbers, that might be one way for them to be able to do a check and see, oh my gosh, look at all these rapid rehousing programs that are set up in HMIS. If there is any confusion, I would say always make it clear to your funder how your programs are set up in HMIS, because we've set them up based on the funder request and the agency request. And you're right, funders may not know off the top of their head that at Solid Ground there's 6 different programs that, all these clients have been enrolled into, and then that's the population that you're running the report on. So I would just say, make sure, don't assume that every agency is set up like yours. It's probably not. And so just make sure that you're in good communication, that everybody knows, to just be clear. These are all the projects that are set up in HMIS that we are running these reports on. This is how we are getting this data. If any funders in the room want to speak to their perspective on this, please chime in. But I would just say open communication is the best way to take care of that issue, because we don't know whether the funders know that they should include those 3 other programs. Does that help answer?
Yeah, I know some agencies are enrolling people in all the programs, which to me means that they're duplicating clients in HMIS, but maybe I have wrong think about that to combat that problem.
I feel like we're going to get down into your specific agency's unique situation that I know we haven't come to a clear resolution on yet. So but but that is a good concern to have, and we should always make sure there's not double data entry happening, you know, for the same program enrollment, essentially. So let's make sure that's not happening.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so I'm Sarah from the City of Seattle. They have an open RFP, so I'm trying to answer specific questions right now, but there have been several specific questions that have gotten submitted through our, I don't know, RFP sort of public questions specifically about this. Some responses on the RFP website. I would refer everybody to those resources. So I know this has been a couple times already.
So for folks online who couldn't hear that, Joy from the City of Seattle is here. And because there's an open RFP process, she's reminding us all that agencies, applicants can post questions at the public RFP site, and there's Q&A happening at that site so that you can get your questions answered. Are there other questions? Did anybody learn anything new today?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's good. You're all crammed in here. Sarah and I are always available. I would remind you that we never expect that you would walk away from any training knowing everything and never coming back with a question. Feel free to contact either one of us, or if you need to set up some one-on-one technical assistance, we do that with agencies all the time. Some of you that you know, I've worked with one-on-one on the phone, or we've gone out and done agency visits to get everybody on the same page. So that is always available. There should be no reason why you can't get your answers, get answers to your questions around HMIS and how it's useful to you. Now, if we, like you saw, and when we get recommendations, or if we find out what you need about ways that the standard reports can be enhanced, give those to us. We might not be able to fix it right then, but we will always be feeding those recommendations back to our report developers. We are always letting them know what our community needs so that we can get those enhancements pushed through the pipeline sooner than later. Anything else from any of our other guests? Okay, we will be here. There's a break. Oh, thank you. There are upcoming trainings. We're going to be sending out in the newsletter this week. There will be registration links for the both the data standards webinars that are coming up in August, and also our user support office hours, which sometimes end up being very specific if we go deep, if somebody has a burning question, or ends up being sort of an HMIS 101. So the times and the registration links for those online sessions will be coming out in the newsletter. Yes?
People make sure they get the newsletter if they aren't already.
That's a good question. I'm on the HMIS website. That one, you can always shoot us an email, but on the HMIS website that Sarah showed you, this email sign up button will put you on our MailChimp subscription list. And that's where we send the newsletter typically to every user that has a user account in the system if they've signed up for the list. Sometimes you'll get something from one of us, even if you know that you're not on the list, because we've grabbed a list of new users and want to make sure that you know about the office hours. But that's the way to get on. And we do a lot of report articles in that newsletter, and we send out the registration links in the newsletter as well.
And when you sign up, you should receive a confirmation email. If you don't receive that, let us know. We've been hearing some reports of folks having trouble signing up. So we just want to make sure that you do get on the list. So if you don't get that confirmation, just follow up with us or our help desk and we'll get you on there.
I have some business cards here on the table, and if you did not sign into the registration sheet, please do. We track very closely our attendance, and it's very helpful, and we have to report as a vendor about our trainees, sort of our attendance. So please sign up for us, and if you weren't on the list, just add your name.
Can you go back to the slides?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the slides. Yes.
And I also just wanted to mention just one last thing, folks. Everyone, please wait. So for folks, as you probably have heard, HUD is making changes to the data standards. There are some big changes and some small changes, but we are offering 2 webinars to go over those changes in August. So please don't hesitate to sign up for one if you are interested in finding out about those changes. We'll be talking a lot about that as the changes get closer, but this is a great way to get an overview of everything that will be changing. So this is the first time we've mentioned them, so we just wanted to point those out. Other than that, I think.
Yes, okay, we're here for questions and there'll be a break before the meeting.